It's 4 in the afternoon on Friday, October 24th here in Seoul. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Seoul and Washington have finally come to a conclusion on when the transfer of wartime operational command should take place. Now, currently, the U.S. has control of the troops on South Korea's soil, and it looks like it will stay that way until the mid-2020s. Kim Min-ji has our top story.
South Korea and the United States have agreed to postpone once again the transfer of wartime operational control of Korean troops from Washington to Seoul. The two allies did not set a new timeline, but the transfer is expected to take place sometime in the mid-2020s. The decision came at the annual Security Consultative Meeting in Washington between South Korea's Defense Minister Min-koo and his U.S. counterpart Chuck Hagel. The handover was initially scheduled for 2012 before being delayed to 2015. Seoul has peacetime control of its 639,000 service members, but if a war breaks out on the Korean peninsula, the U.S. commander of the American troops here takes the control of the Korean soldiers. According to a joint statement released after the meeting, the deal was made in light of the evolving security environment in the region, which includes North Korea's nuclear and missile threats and the need to maintain a strong combined defense posture. Seoul and Washington agreed to a conditions-based approach. The eventual transfer will only come once the security environment in the region allows for a stable transition, when the South Korean military is equipped with core capabilities and is ready to counter threats from the north. Based upon the recommendations of the defense chiefs, the presidents of South Korea and the U.S. will determine the appropriate timing for the transition. In a joint press conference, Hagel reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to its ally.
I emphasize that the United States remains committed to using all our military capabilities both on and off the Korean Peninsula, including conventional strike, missile defense, and our nuclear umbrella, to ensure that our extended deterrence is credible and effective.
The agreement underlines the strong alliance and determination of the two nations to cope with threats posed by North Korea. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And after being hit with a wave of mixed reactions to that latest development, South Korea's presidential office says it stands by its position that Seoul should eventually take over the peninsula's wartime operational control. Presidential spokesperson Min-koo said there's a need to thoroughly prepare for the transfer in light of the mounting nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. He added South Korea and the U.S. will continue to discuss the right timing and security environment for the handover, with an ultimate goal of deterring the North from launching more provocations and helping Seoul and Washington boost their joint defense capabilities. And going back to the talks in Washington, there was another topic which Chuck Hagel mentioned. He made clear that there were no official discussions between Seoul and Washington on deploying a U.S.-led missile defense system on the Korean peninsula. Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel says the U.S. has no plans to reduce the number of American troops stationed in South Korea. Speaking at a joint news conference alongside Korean Defense Chief Min-koo at the Pentagon on Thursday, Hagel said the United States does not intend to change its deployment policy for Korea. In fact, it's just the opposite. Hagel said Washington wants to adjust and upgrade deployments on a rotational basis. The defense chief's remarks follow others made by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on Wednesday, when he said the U.S. was prepared to begin reducing the number of American forces in the region if North Korea shows a commitment to denuclearizing. Hagel also spoke for the first time publicly about the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system in the South. He said there have been no formal discussions on the matter on any level between Seoul and Washington, although he did add that all options are being explored. The issue came to the fore when Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work said earlier this month that the U.S. was considering sending the defense system to South Korea, and that talks were being had with Seoul on the matter. Korea is focused on developing its own missile defense systems, which it says are better suited to countering missile threats on the peninsula. That includes the Korea Air and Missile Defense and the Kill Chain system, which can knock out ballistic missiles prior to launch. It is hoping to put these systems in place by 2023, as they are a key part of the national defense that will be necessary for the OPCON transfer to take place. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, North Korea has warned of more military strikes if activists in the south continue to fly anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the inter-Korean border. Now that has observers and citizens living near the border worried as the group has plans to fly 50,000 more tomorrow. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
The voices of those opposed to the flying of air balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the inter-Korean border are growing louder. For those living in the border region, it's an issue of safety. North Korea warned of another military strike if South Korean air balloons are seen crossing its border, just as it did 2 weeks ago.
Our residents and activists from civic groups will block any further attempts.
A group of activists say they will send as many as 50,000 leaflets this Saturday to disseminate much-needed information in the reclusive state.
When North Koreans are aware of the truth, their fury against the North Korean leadership will soar.
North Korea has repeatedly called on the South to stop the spread of the leaflets, saying it will jeopardize upcoming high-level talks. The two have agreed to meet sometime between late October and early November.
If the South Korean government takes responsible steps to prevent provocative actions that call for military clashes, there's no reason to cancel the planned second round of high-level talks.
Analysts say North Korea is trying to get an upper hand at the upcoming talks by setting the leaflet issue as one of the agenda items. Some question the effectiveness of the leaflets and say it's merely a publicity stunt for the activists.
Want to have some events, and it's really about them to demonstrate their anti-communism or their opposition to North Korea. But as far as actually getting information into North Korea, changing anything on the ground, I think the effect is practically zero.
The South Korean government says they have no legal grounds to ban activists from sending the leaflets. But the National Police Agency said Friday that police will step in if the situation appears to threaten the public safety. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, at the root of the division between the South and the North is, of course, the Korean War. And if you ask members of the older generation in Korea, they will tell you about the support the country got from the UN soldiers fighting here at the time. Our Kwon So-ah has this story.
United Nations Day is being celebrated across the world this October 24th with a goal of raising awareness of the organization's aims and achievements. The UN Charter to maintain peace and security around the world came into force after the Second World War ended in 1945. In Korea, the significance of United Nations Day lies in the huge role UN member states played during the Korean War in the early 1950s. But today, it's not commemorated on a large scale as it used to be when it was a public holiday. But that doesn't mean that Koreans have forgotten the sacrifices made by the hundreds of thousands of troops dispatched from 16 UN member nations. This group of students met with BBC broadcaster John Hardy, whose father Kenneth is a Korean War veteran, and thanked him.
I think Korea is doing a tremendous job keeping the awareness alive. Unfortunately, officially, I don't suppose that it's come to an end because we're still in an armistice stage.
The war veteran's son added how important he thinks it is for young Koreans to remember where they come from.
I think it's a really honor for us, for a person from the UK to come all over to Korea just to honor his father and giving us an opportunity to express our gratefulness towards them.
My friend had a grandfather who also participated in the Korean War, and he always added to his story that he still loved Korea and he still wanted to help Korea. So that's why this opportunity is really special for me.
Mr. Hardy says he wanted to visit Korea so he could pass on his father's legacy to his children and grandchildren.
It's almost like filling in a gap in our family history. I knew my father had been here. He didn't talk very much about it, and it's always intrigued me what went on during his time in Korea. Korea's been known as the forgotten war for too long.
권소아, 아리랑 뉴스.
In other news, Korea is adding another layer to its international campaign to counter Japan's claims to Dokdo Island, and it includes reaching out to more of the international community. Korea's foreign ministry will release 7 new translations of its video on Dokdo at the stroke of midnight on Saturday. The 4-minute clip asserts that the rocky islets in the East Sea are an integral part of Korean territory, historically, geographically, and under international law as well. The ferry that has been trapped underwater for 6 months after a tragic sinking that killed more than 300 people may soon be brought up to the surface. The 9 families of the missing have told their lawyer that they will review whether the hull of the Seoul ferry can be brought to the surface as part of the final step in the search process. The families reportedly say they are willing to talk with the government and that they are discussing whether to put the fate of the search process up for a vote and allow a 2/3 majority to take the lead. Korea's third quarter GDP growth is out, and although the economy grew nearly 1% on quarter, the pace of that growth has fallen short of expectations. Officials attribute this to sluggish exports and facilities investment. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
It was not all good news, although the Korean economy accelerated in the July to September period. The Bank of Korea said Friday that the domestic economy grew 0.9% in the third quarter this year from a quarter earlier, speeding up from a 0.5% growth in the April to June period. That, however, was largely due to a low base in the second quarter when domestic consumption dropped sharply after April's ferry disaster. It was also the increased government spending that led the rise.
The execution of public finances that were delayed because of the local elections and Seoul ferry disaster took place in the third quarter, contributing to third quarter growth.
From a year earlier, the Korean economy expanded 3.2%, the slowest pace in more than a year. And Korea's traditional growth engine, exports, slipped 2.6% in the third quarter from the previous quarter, while the output in the country's manufacturing sector dropped 0.9%. That marks the first drop in 5.5 years. The central bank cited the sluggish global economy and the recent poor performance by some of Korea's major conglomerates like Samsung Electronics as major reasons. Facility investment also dropped 0.8%, marking a slowdown from a surprise rise in the second quarter this year of 1.1%. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
And there may be a reason why facilities investment was seeing a drop. Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and LG Group, at least for now, seems to be investing more in research and development, building additional centers in Seoul. Kim Ji-yeon has our next story.
Some of Korea's largest conglomerates are building research and development outposts in the capital city of Seoul, a move seen as an attempt to attract more high-quality human resources. Tech giant Samsung Electronics is building a state-of-the-art R&D center on 33,000 square meters of land in the Umyeondong area of Seochogu in southern Seoul. Around 10,000 researchers are expected to move into the new center, which is reportedly envisioned as a more eco-friendly and somewhat more creative facility than the conventional office building. The move follows the company's completion of new research complexes in Gyeonggi-do Province, one in the city of Suwon last November and another in Hwasong in March for the study of electron material. The company spent nearly $14 billion on R&D last year and recruited more than 69,300 researchers. Automotive giant Hyundai Motor is reportedly considering turning its campus in Yangjae-dong into a research complex after having acquired a plot of land in the Samsung-dong district earlier this year. And on Thursday, electronics giant LG Group held a groundbreaking ceremony in Magok Industrial Park for its LG Science Park. Upon completion, the facility is to be the largest technology convergence research center in Korea. Kim Jung, ARIRANG News.
The nation's 3 mobile carriers began receiving pre-orders for the latest Apple devices this Friday afternoon, with prices starting at 850,000 won, or that's roughly about $800 for the iPhone 6 and around $930 for the iPhone 6 Plus. Now, with just a week left before they hit stores in Korea, SK Telecom, KT, and LG U Plus are rolling out a series of promotional campaigns to get a jump on what's expected to be some tough competition. SK Telecom is highlighting customized services for iPhone users, while LG is offering discounts on the devices. KT, in the meantime, is touting its high number of base stations nationwide. Seoul has taken another step toward its goal of launching a completely homegrown rocket. Korea's Science Ministry says the country's first engine test facility has been completed at Samsung Techwind factory site in Changwon, located about 40 kilometers north of port city Busan. Now, that's where 4 75-ton engines for the first stage of the rocket and the 7-ton engine of the third stage will be assembled and put through a battery of tests. Korea succeeded in launching its first carrier rocket, the NATO, from its soil in January 2013 and is now trying to launch a fully home-built rocket within the next 5 years, as NATO's first stage was built by Russia.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
The Canadian police have released surveillance video of the now deceased gunman at the country's parliament on Wednesday, and it shows how he gained access to the facility. And with this latest shooting, Canada is moving to bolster laws to counter terrorism. Connie Kim has this report.
The surveillance video of the shooting in Canada Wednesday morning shows how the gunman got into Parliament. The video shows 32-year-old Michael Bibo pulling up in a car, getting out with a firearm, and running toward the complex. Police say they recognize that something was wrong and that security officers engaged in an exchange of gunfire. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said in a press conference that Bibo had acted alone and was not one of the 90 people identified as high-risk travelers they were monitoring.
Our partners at the Ottawa Police Service and the RCMP agree that yesterday Bibo acted alone and that he is the same person that perpetrated the attacks at both the National War Memorial and on Parliament Hill.
The motive behind the shooting is still being investigated, but officials suspect Bibo was self-radicalized. He's reported to harbor extremist beliefs and had previously expressed a desire to go to Syria to join the jihadist fight there. Wednesday's shooting left 24-year-old Corporal Nathan Cirillo dead with 3 people injured. And with the nation in a state of fear, the Canadian Prime Minister said the country would stand firm.
We will be vigilant, but we will not run scared. We will be prudent, but we will not panic.
Prime Minister Harper made public his plans to install new anti-terror powers and strengthen the country's terror laws. This includes giving more power to the intelligence service to track and detain suspected terrorists. Canadian Prime Minister also pledged to speed up plans that will toughen the powers of surveillance, detention, and arrest. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Preliminary blood tests have shown that a New York City doctor has contracted Ebola. 33-year-old Dr. Craig Spencer, who recently returned from Guinea, placed himself in isolation on Thursday after developing fever and gastrointestinal symptoms. A follow-up blood test will be conducted by the CDC. City government and health officials held a press conference and assured the public that the chances of an average New Yorker contracting Ebola from Dr. Spencer are slim. In the country of Mali, though, the first Ebola case there has been confirmed in a 2-year-old girl. She has also traveled from neighboring Guinea. Now this as the WHO's Emergency Committee on Ebola reinforced that winning against the Ebola outbreak means stopping the transmission in West Africa. And shifting gears, fewer Koreans are celebrating their silver and golden wedding anniversaries these days because they aren't staying together long enough. The number of so-called gray divorces has hit a record high here in Korea. Connie Lee tells us more.
It's until death do us part. Or not. New data shows that more older people are getting divorced in Korea. It's the so-called gray divorces, or the splitting of couples married for 20-plus years that have been on the steady rise for the past 5 years. And last year, it hit a new high. More than 32,000 of these couples ended their marriages in 2013, making gray divorces the largest portion of all divorces at about 28%. Experts point to the aging population of baby boomers for the large number. But other than that, there is a change in how older spouses view marriages that is prompting them to split.
Different from before, older spouses now seek their personal happiness and fulfillment, especially after their kids are out of the house. If they're not getting that in their marriages, then they are opting for divorce.
The professor adds that there's less of a social stigma attached to divorce than there was decades ago, making it a bit easier for couples to officially end their marriages in court. So what were the top reasons why Koreans got a divorce last year? Well, data shows that personality differences was number one, followed by financial problems and domestic issues, such as infidelity. However, gray divorce isn't just a trend seen in Korea. The United States has been seeing this phenomenon for similar reasons. A recent report called The Gray Divorce Revolution by Susan L. Brown and I-Fen Lin says that the number of gray divorces has doubled in the U.S. since 1990. And with lifespans increasing, experts expect more gray divorces in the future. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
It's a bright Friday, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather updates. We have some perfect fall-like weather here today with mostly clear skies except in Seoul where it's a bit cloudy and foggy at the same time. This will clear as the temperature rises. However, strong winds are expected over in Gangwon province today. Now, once the fog clears, we can expect to see some stronger sunshine with some temperatures slightly higher than yesterday and ranging into the low 20s. Now, the weekend forecast looks favorable as well. In fact, we can expect some warmer highs. However, from Sunday to Monday, we are expecting some precipitation here in the central region. Now going over to our readings for today, Seoul will peak at 21 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will be slightly higher at 22 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 21 as well, while Dokdo hits in the low 20s, while Gangneung will be slightly lower at 13 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. I'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.